if a U.S. citizen has gone to another country and fallen in love and met the love of their life, and now they want their person to come to this country, what should they do? Well, this U.S. citizen is going to be picking between two options if they're not yet married. The first is the fiancé visa process, and we've all seen 90-day fiancé. We know that's a thing. But the way this works is the U.S., they don't get married, but the U.S. citizen petitions for the love of their life to come here, and then within 90 days, they have to get married and file for the green card. What I can say is that that's one of the fastest ways to bring the person to the country. But also in my experience, it comes with a host of other complications because when that immigrant comes here, they're not yet married. This couple typically hasn't lived together, and the immigrant themselves doesn't have work or travel permission for many months. So they have culture shock, brand new life. They're not able to work. They're not able to go home and visit their family for a period of time. And I've actually seen a lot of relationships fall apart after we do the fiancé visa process. So I don't always recommend it. And I like to talk to my clients about those pitfalls that aren't necessarily legal challenges, but they really do impact people who go through the fiancé process. On the other hand, let's say the couple has spent a little bit more time together and they're already ready to get married. Well, they get married abroad, and then we bring the immigrant spouse over already with their green card. So they come into their country, they already have a green card, they can drive, they can work, they can travel, they can have all the freedoms of a person who's living in the country. And that makes things go a little bit smoother for the couple. But it takes longer. So we have to balance the desire. Do we want to be together as fast as possible in the United States? And are we willing to bear the risks of what it might look like on the other side? Or do we want to be a little bit more patient and have more rights for the immigrant spouse when they come in? These are the things that you should be talking to your immigration lawyer about in a consultation, because as I always say, immigration is way more than just paperwork. It's about the strategy and the desire of the people. What do you want? What's your future look like? What are the things that matter to you, so that your immigration lawyer can design the strategy that works best for the family? This is one of the most common questions that I get as an immigration lawyer. How do I prove that my marriage to my spouse is valid? Because I think most of us know when a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident is petitioning for their spouse to get a green card, immigration wants to know that this is a valid marriage. It's not fraudulent. So how do they figure that out? Well, mostly it's through the evidence that you submit. It's good faith marriage evidence that you'll include in your packet. I prefer official evidence so nobody questions it. This is going to look like a will, a mortgage statement, bank statements that you share, or lease contracts if you rent a home together. Do you share a gym membership? Do you share a phone bill? The things that are official documents from other businesses that have both your names on it and ideally your shared address on it will be great pieces of evidence to prove your valid marriage. If you don't have a lot of official evidence, because maybe it's a new relationship, you just started living together, etc., you can do more of what I like to call the squishy evidence. That's going to be social media posts, pictures of you two together, affidavits from friends and family saying, I know this couple, this is a real couple. But I don't like to overdo the squishy evidence because then immigration will start to dig in and question it. It's much better to just go official if you can, or do some type of blend. I also like to submit as much evidence as I can on the front end, because even though you're going to be able to bring evidence to your interview, it just makes everything go smoother at the interview if you've already given them a lot of evidence. And one thing to be careful about is that if immigration suspects marriage fraud, let's say there's a big disparity in age, or the petitioner has already given a bunch of spouses their green cards, which has happened, they're going to flag the case for potential fraud. They might send an investigator to the home to make sure everybody's home and sleeping in the same place. Or they might do something called a Stokes interview, where they separate the couple at the final interview and they ask you just random questions about each other, like, how does the furniture look in your house? And what color is your husband's toothbrush? And where did you go to celebrate your birthday? What was the last trip you took together? Things that you cannot really plan and prepare for, so you need to actually be in a valid marriage if you're in that type of interview. Finally, I'll say fraudulent marriages are just a no-go. Bad idea. Don't do it because they come with both civil and criminal penalties for the immigrant and the U.S. citizen. So if you know an immigrant, you kind of want to help them out because you want them to stay here, but this is not a valid marriage, just don't do it. Let's have the immigrant come in for a consultation with an immigration lawyer and we can talk about what else is available so we don't go down the route of fraudulent marriages. Once a couple is filing for a green card, let's say we have a U.S. citizen or permanent resident spouse, they file the application for their immigrant spouse to get a green card. Most of these cases are going to end in an interview with the immigration agency. And most of these interviews are pretty straightforward and last 30 minutes or less. The officer is looking through the paperwork, they're checking all the evidence, they're making sure all the biographic information is correct, and they can usually approve it without a whole bunch of trouble. But if there are any problems or there's any fraud suspected, the couple will be put into a different type of interview where they'll be questioned about each other, and that's going to delay the outcome of the case. And there could be a denial. Let's say there's a denial for fraud. Well, at that point, the couple is going to have an option of responding or fighting, which is generally advisable if it's not a fraudulent marriage because you don't want to end up with that on your record. But these are things that hopefully you can avoid if at the front end you've consulted with a good qualified immigration lawyer who can help you understand what's the important evidence. And then we can also spot, are there any issues in this case that we need to be able to explain to the officer so that it doesn't become an issue down the line. Let's say a U.S. citizen has gone abroad and they've fallen in love, met the love of their life, and now they want to bring their spouse to the United States. Well, if they've already gotten married, we can't do a fiancé visa, and we'll be doing what's called a spousal petition. It's a two-step process where we file the family petition, prove valid marriage, and then we submit a lot of sponsorship paperwork to the Department of State before a consular interview. That's a lot of jargon, but what essentially does that mean? Step 1. Prove valid marriage with evidence that this is really a couple. Step 2, prove that the U.S. citizen petitioner can be a sponsor. What does that mean? That means they earn enough income to keep their immigrant spouse above the poverty guidelines. For a couple of 2 people, a family of 2, it's around a $20,000 per year minimum. And you prove that through check stubs and tax returns, etc. All of this goes to the embassy before the interview even happens. The final step is an interview where the immigrant spouse goes to the U.S. consulate or embassy in their country. They've done a medical exam. They've gotten all their vaccinations. All the sponsorship paperwork is done. All the proof of valid marriage has been entered and reviewed by immigration. And it's just a final review at the consulate, which if it all goes according to plan, gets approved quickly, and then the immigrant spouse gets to come in with their green card. And they're here and it's great. One thing to know is that depending on where you are, this process can take a while. There's a lot of backlog in Mexico, for example. So we want to be prepared and talk through what are the actual processing times we're seeing when we start a case so that this couple, who is very much in love and presumably wants to live together in the United States, is prepared for the length of time that they're facing apart, or whether the U.S. citizen, for example, would like to go live with the immigrant while the case is pending. That's, of course, an option.